As advertised, since we've been doing all of the Tehillim, which are connected to Kabbalat Shabbat, we've done, the six representing the days of the week. And when we're done with this, we'll do Mizmor Shel Yom Shabbat. But this week we're going to do, for the only second time in the 3 years I've been doing the shiur, that we're going to do something other than Tehillim. We did Shirat Hayam as Yeshua one time, but it just makes sense to stop in this process and do Lecha Dodi. Lecha Dodi, I was just talking to David Hawkeiser, who's the wonderful young man that sets up the Zoom program for us, and he pointed out correctly that this is the newest addition to the Siddur that is accepted by everyone. That all of the Eidot have Lecha Dodi, Haredim, Unorthodox, everybody, conservative, reform, everybody has Lecha Dodi. And it's really remarkable that not only is it the newest addition to the Siddur, it's by far the newest. The previous editions that were universally accepted go back to the time of the Gaonim, the time when things like Yom Pukan was written and added, so that this is really quite remarkable that so quickly this poem got accepted into our Siddur. We're always adding, things, but they're not universal. Some people say, some people don't. I would love to say that everybody says the tefillah for the Chayalim on Shabbat, but we know that's not true. So this is the last thing that was universally, okay, hopefully I can pay attention to the poem and everyone's in. Universally accepted. It was written by Shlomo Halevi Alkabetz, and he was fascinating, and his background is going to come into the story when we get to actually the fourth stanza, which we may get to today. But his parents were amongst those who left Spain, and Baruch Hashem survived. A majority of those who left probably perished. But his parents made it to Salonika, and that's he was born in 1504. And he lived there for about 20 years, and then he decided to move to Eretz Yisrael. And on his way to Eretz Yisrael, he went through Turkey, and he stayed in a couple of places in Turkey. And in 1526, he was there at the house of the Mechaber, Rabbi Yosef Karo, and he became very close with the Mechaber, and they were there for Shavuot. And it was during that time together that the two of them decided to stay up all night and learn on Shavuot. So they invented what we call Tikkun Leil Shavuot, and this has become, again, a universally accepted custom. I know some of us don't do it only because we're too tired, but generally speaking, it is universally accepted that people stay up, and they stayed up both nights actually, and and then not together, but soon both of them had made it to Eretz Yisrael, and they both settled in Sfat. Sfat, in the middle of the 16th century, was an amazing place. We just mentioned two of the giants, from Shlomo Alkabetz and Rabbi Yosef Karo, but before too long, there was Yehuda Beiram was there, the Alshich was there. By 1570, the Ari HaKadosh was there. It was just an amazing, it was a tiny shtetl, and it had this just amazing collection of tremendous scholars who really, number one, invented Kabbalat Shabbat itself. There was an argument between two of the leading Kabbalists. The Ari started just with Psalm 29, Havul Hashem, which was the last Psalm we did, and it was the brother-in-law of Shlomo Alkabetz, Reb Moshe Cordovera, the Ramak, who decided, no, we should do all 6 of these Psalms, and that became accepted by everyone. And it was just a remarkable gathering of tremendous scholars, both of halacha, like, of course, Rabbi Yosef Karo and Yehuda Beirav and others. But of course, it's more famous for the collection of mystics, who included Shlomo Alkabetz, his brother-in-law, Rav Moshe Cordovera, and of course the Ari, who inherited the mantle from the Ramak when he passed away in 1570, and the Alshich was part of it. Chaim Vital, the famous student of the Ari. It was just a remarkable sort of 2 generations or so, from the 1530s till about 1600. And in 1600, it started to dissipate because of financial problems in the community, and the leadership of Kabbalah in Eretz Yisrael moved from Tzfat to Tveria, and it stayed in Tveria for the next, I'm going to say 150 to 200 years, when it went to both Yerushalayim and back to Tzfat. But that golden age was just for an absolutely remarkable time. I remember in the year 2000, the New York Times Magazine. Remember when we used to read the New York Times? Okay, the New York Times Magazine, getting ready for the millennium change, had an article in the Sunday Times asking historians, if you could visit any place in the last 1,000 years, where would it be? So some people said the Battle of Waterloo. Some people said the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Some people say the signing of Magna Carta in 1215. There were all sorts of interesting choices of importance. Somebody said Gutenberg, the invention of the printing press. All sorts of suggestions were made. And the first thing I thought of when I saw this fascinating article, because I was a history major in college, was, gee, I would have loved to have been in Tzfat in 1570. Just after the Ari arrived from Yerushalayim, and just before the Ramak passed away. Must have been amazing. But like I said, it started to dissipate already by the 1580s, and it was basically over by the year 1600. But there was the greatest single invention of this group of gentlemen, besides most of the songs we sing on Shabbos and many other customs that we have. But the most famous invention was Kabbalat Shabbat, and the centerpiece of Kabbalat Shabbat became, of course, our poem Lecha Dodi, that we're going to take a look at. And let's start this right away. It has, the poem, in terms of its makeup, has 10 different stanzas. The first and shortest, of course, is the refrain, Lecha Dodi, and not counting the first one and the last one, the 8 in the middle spell out the first letter in each stanza, spells out Shlomo Halevi, which of course is the signature of our poet who wrote the poem, Shlomo Halevi Alkabetz. The number 10 was not a coincidence that the number 10, because it's, you could say 10 commandments, but 10 in Kabbalah, like the 10 Sfirot, means it contains everything. 10, like the 10 digits of our hands, means when you get, to 10, those 9 plus 0 numbers, you can make any number you want. So this is the basis for everything, is the number 10. So that's one of the reasons he chose it. And the poem begins, Lecha Dodi, come, walk with me, Dodi, my beloved, likrat kala, towards the bride. Now, this phrase, come with me towards the bride, is based on a pasuk in Shir Hashirim. Now, of course, we know that it was their custom as well to recite Shir Hashirim on Friday night. They would come to shul early and say Shir Hashirim. But in Shir Hashirim, Perek Zion, Pasuk Yudbet, chapter 7, verse 12, it says, Lecha Dodi, Neitzei Hasadeh. So it says, come, my beloved, let us go out into the field. And so that's what they were doing. They were doing just like in the poem Shir Hashirim in the Megillah, which is also poetic. Shir Hashirim, let's go out into the field together with my beloved. And this idea which Shlomo HaMelech wrote concerning him and his beloved in the love song Shir Hashirim, it was taken by our sages. And in the Gemara, in two different places, it says Reb Chanina. So Rebbe Chanina Hitatev used to enwrap himself. Now that probably means he put on a talit, and we do know that many Mikubalim do wear a talis a Friday night for Kabbalat Shabbat. It's not just the Chazan. Quite often you'll see, the rabbi of the shul, whatever. I remember I spent the Shabbos in. It's been on my mind because yesterday was Chayei Sarah. I spent the Shabbos many, many years ago. My first trip to Eretz Yisrael on my pilot trip in 1982, and I spent the Shabbos at davening at Marat Machpelah, stayed in Kiryat Arba, and walked over. And Reb Waldman wore on Friday night all white, and he was wearing a white talit and white shirt and white pants, and was wearing an Uzi as well. It just struck me, all the symbolism involved in that. But this idea of lehitate for Kabbalat Shabbat is accepted and not uncommon, especially in mystic circles. And you see it quite often in Sfat. If you get the opportunity to spend Shabbos in Sfat, you'll see quite often people doing it. So Reb Chanina Vayetze, and went out of the city, Likabel Shabbat, to receive the Shabbos. And he said, Bo'u Neitze, and he said to his students, come, let's go, Likrat Shabbat HaMalka. Let's go out towards Shabbat the Queen. And this Gemara, which is in Masechet Shabbos and in Baba Kama, the Rambam puts into the halacha. So in other words, it's a halacha. The Rambam, Hilchos Shabbos, chapter 30, halacha 2, the Chachamim Arishonim, the early scholars, hayu mikabtzim talmideihem. They used to gather their students and say to them, Erev Shabbat, they used to gather the students Erev Shabbos, and wrap themselves, again, probably in talit, the omrim, and they used to say, Bo'u, and then it quotes the Gemara, Bo'u netzei likrat Shabbat HaMalka. Let's go out and Shabbat the Queen. Okay. So that's what's going on here, that there's a fulfillment in our first stanza of trying to do this minhag that goes back at least to the time of the Gemara. Who knows, maybe even earlier. So, beloved, who is the beloved? Okay, we'll talk about that in a minute. Likrat kala, towards the kala. Pinei Shabbat nikabla. We're going to greet the face. We're going to greet the Shabbat. So we've got three people. We've got a Dodi, we've got a Kala, and we've got Shabbat. So who are these three characters? And it's not so clear. It's not so clear. Most of the commentaries on this believe the Dodi is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that we're asking HaKadosh, the beloved, just like in Shir Shirim, the beloved is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we're coming and we're going to greet the bride. Who's the bride? Who's the bride? And then we're going to greet Shabbat. We're going towards the Kala, and we're going to greet Shabbat. So Pshat is, if there is Pshat in this, literal meaning is Shabbat is the bride. And this idea that Shabbat is the bride makes sense because there's a famous midrash in Breshit Rabbah that the Rashbi, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. Now, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, of course, is the father of Jewish mysticism, of Kabbalah, according to tradition. He's the author of the Zohar, and the Ari in 1571 on Lag BaOmer, the Yortzeit of the Rashbi, claimed to be the reincarnation of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. He went to his kever and claimed in front of his followers that he was the reincarnation, the Gilgul of the Rashbi. But anyways, so the Rashbi said that Shabbos came to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Amr Shabbos Lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shabbos comes to Hashem and says, Rabbanu Shalom, Master of the Universe, Lechulan Yesh Ben Zug. Everybody's got a mate. Now, who's everybody? Everybody met the other days of the week. That Monday somehow mates with Wednesday. Sunday mates with Wednesday. Monday mates with Thursday, and Tuesday mates with Friday. And there are many reasons. You can go through Psukim in the first chapter of Bereshis, and you can see reasons why this makes sense, but we're not going to do that now, okay? And he says, "V'li ein ben zug." I don't have a mate. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu. Kadosh Baruch Hu said to Knesset Yisrael, the community of Israel, he ben zug. That's your mate. That Shabbos mates, marries, comes together with Bnei Yisrael, with the Jewish people. So the most obvious point of view explaining this pasuk is, come Hashem, we're going to greet Hashem. You're the Shadchan, so you should be there too. Come Hashem, and we're going to make the wedding with the Kala, which is Shabbos. So Bnei Yisrael, Knesset Yisrael, is marrying Shabbos. Okay, so that's I think what's really going on in this pasuk, but not everybody agrees. Some people say that this is based on the Gemara in Shabbos about Ma'amad Har Sinai, that the marriage is between Klal Yisrael and Hashem. Just like on Shavuot, HaKadosh Baruch Hu lifted up the mountain over our heads, and the mountain was the chuppah, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu had, this marriage and the Kesef Kedushin instead of a ring. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us the luchot. So it could be a marriage between Hashem and Klal Yisrael, and there are Meforshim that think that that's what Shlomo Alkabetz had in mind. There's another idea. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm just going to say it quickly. I mean, we could get lost in this concept forever. That there are many aspects to a HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is one, but that one is according to the Kabbalists, sort of more kav, sort of complex. And that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has not only the masculine side, but has as well a feminine side called Shechina. So that what's happening is in our in our situation, HaKadosh Baruch Hu on Shabbat, HaKadosh Baruch Hu actually becomes more unified than HaKadosh Baruch Hu is during the week. We could spend forever talking about this, and I apologize. I'm just mentioning it as an idea that on Shabbat, the unity of Shabbat brings together the disparate parts of the day and the disparate parts of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kaviyachol, himself, which is, and the day itself is very, very complicated. That's why Friday night, Shabbos morning, and Shabbos afternoon, there are different versions of the Amidah, of the silent devotion that we say, because the day itself has many, many different aspects. And Shabbat, Friday night, is considered feminine, and Shabbos morning is considered masculine. Vayinuchu va, Vayinuchu vo, and then Shabbos afternoon is like the culmination, the two get together, Vayinuchu vam, that there was a resting on them together. So that there is an opinion that Rav Shlomo Alkabetz is talking about this esoteric Kabbalistic idea. Let's stick with Klal Yisrael is marrying Shabbos, because I think that's the clearest meaning for most of us. That this is, the get together between Klal Yisrael and Shabbat. But it's a very beautiful idea, and people wearing white. It looks like a wedding. And then, so that's the refrain that gets recited over and over again, obviously, after each stanza. And then we come to the first stanza. Shamur v'zachur b'dibor echad. Okay. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and this again is a Gemara in Shabbos. It says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when the Ten Commandments were given, there's two versions of the Ten Commandments. One in chapter 20 of Shemot, and one in chapter 4 of Devarim. And in the first set, it says, Zechor Yom Shabbat, remember the Sabbath day. And in Devarim, it says, Shamor et Yom Shabbat, observe, keep, guard the Sabbath day. In front of me, my translation from Koren is observe and remember, observe. And so those two versions of the tablets presents a problem to the Mefarshim. Were there really two sets of versions of the Ten Commandments on the two sets of tablets? So one pshat is, yeah, there really were two. That the first set that was broken by Moshe Rabbeinu after the sin of the golden calf was replaced with the second set, and the second set had these slightly different versions in it. However, that's not the most accepted position. The most accepted position is that somehow both versions were simultaneously existing on both sets of tablets, and that Shamor v'Zachor, the two words beginning the fourth commandment about keeping Shabbos, was said simultaneously by Hashem in a way of speech that we humans can't do. I mean, it would be like, today we could do it. You record your voice and you say it together with yourself, okay? It's like the first time that was done was Lady and the Tramp. Peggy Lee was the Siamese twins, and she did both sides. And so she sang with herself. So, okay, we can do it with technology, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu did it miraculously. Shamor v'Zachor, both of those terms were said simultaneously. Okay, so what does that mean? So Shamor v'Zachor, according to most Mefarshim, means that we have two aspects to Shabbat. We have the Shamor, the negative aspects of Shabbat, and we have the Zachor, the positive aspects, like Shamor, don't do these 39 malachot. Zachor, say Kiddush, daven, enjoy yourself, have oneg, have rest, so that there are the negatives and the positives of Shabbat, and we merge them into a unity. This refers back to the first stanza. When we're talking about come, my beloved, because we're accepting Shabbos and Klal Yisrael is marrying Shabbos, marriage is also a combining of two parts to make a unit. So Shamor v'Zachor is a continuation of that concept that Shabbat is more than any other thing about Shabbat, is combining different aspects, positive and negative, male and female, spiritual and physical. That Shabbat is the day that we truly have unity, unlike the way we are during the week when we're very, very bifurcated between, the spiritual demands and the physical demands. But on Shabbat, we just get together, not just with family and friends, but our personality, our neshama becomes merged. So the beginning of the poem is emphasizing that Shabbat is this unity, whether it's the Jewish nation and Shabbat, positive, negative, spiritual, physical, all of this, and even if you were a mystic, even the disparate parts of HaKadosh Baruch Hu somehow come together in ways I clearly don't understand. Okay.
Okay, one question, please.
Yes.
Who is the narrator? Who is saying Lecha Dodi?
Theoretically, it's. You can say what you want to say, but theoretically, it's Rabbi Chanina. In other words, it's the Rabbi who is taking everybody out, taking the students out, and so this, according to most Meforshim, is the reenactment of the Rebbe, the spiritual leader, taking his flock, students, or whatever, and he is telling them all of these ideas about what accepting Shabbat means. And initially, accepting Shabbat means unifying all of the dichotomies, bifurcations, which exist in our lives. That's the initial idea. But the narrator, so to speak, is the Rebbe, is the leader, the spiritual leader. The source is Rabbi Chanina. Going back further, I'm not, but that's the tzura of the situation. That there is a leader who is informing the flock that this is what we're doing. So Hishmiyanu Kel HaMiyuchad. Okay? The Kel HaMiyuchad. Now, what does Miyuchad mean? Okay, so some people say it's Miyuchad, the unique God, which is a perfect explanation and description of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is totally unique. There's nothing that is, sui generis more than HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that's what it could mean. And he's saying he caused us to hear and perhaps even to understand. Shema can mean understand that normally you can't, if two people are speaking at the same time, you always say to them, okay, stop. Let me listen to you consecutively. But at that moment, Klal Yisrael was able to understand both dikta being said simultaneously by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who is miyuchad. Okay, the one and only God is my translation. However, some people say, don't read it Kel HaMiyuchad, read it Kel HaMiyached. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu, on Shabbos, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the uniter. So it's not God the unique, it's God the unifier. Because there's so much about Shabbos, which is synthesis. Okay, it's Shabbos and the Jewish people. It's God and the Shekhinah. It's Shamor v'Zachor. In other words, all of these things. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu isn't just unique on Shabbat. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is also Hamiyached. He's the synthesizer. He is the unifier on Shabbat, bringing all of the disparate parts of our life and existence, hopefully, into one unified whole. That on Shabbos we don't have the same, the same concerns, and during the week, we're being pulled this way and pulled that way. On Shabbos, we can get Bezrat Hashem. Hopefully, we can get focus and just really feel unified and whole, and that gives us a lot of the menucha. That we don't feel that we're being pulled this way and that, hither and yon, so to speak. So that's what's going on. And then to emphasize this idea, we quote not from Aleinu, although we say this in Aleinu, but of course from chapter 14 of Zechariah. It says, Hashem echad u'shmo echad, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is one and his name, his appellation is one. And that perfect unity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the most outstanding feature of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in making us one, husband, wife, Klal Yisrael and Shabbos, bringing the Jewish community together. All of these unifications is the greatest single out, and this is, which we're going to see much more of later in the poem, is a vision of Geula. But I don't want to get to Geula yet, because Geula only starts in paragraph really number 5. But we may get close to this today, but I'm not sure. Okay, so at the end of the first part, we're emphasizing that Shabbat is a process of unification, right? Bringing all the disparate parts of the community and ourselves and our family together. There are so many families, they only really see each other or eat together on Shabbos. So it's the unifier. And then we just said, Hashem is the unifier, right? And Hashem himself is known for being one and unique. L'shem u'letiferet u'letihila. In other words, the greatness, the renown, the glory of Hashem is this unity. That's the thing that is most amazing about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu does bring all of the disparate parts together, which is remarkable, because when you think about it, we're celebrating creation, and creation was an act of disunity. In other words, everything was together in a kind of before Breshit Bara, before the Big Bang. Okay, everything was together. Then HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Breshit Bara, or everything, boom, separated into many disparate parts. So in other words, creation really separated everything. Shabbat, it brings everything back together. So in other words, we're supposed to feel on Shabbat that things, even though the whole week was everybody going their own way and doing their own thing and competing, and the competition isn't only with the next guy, we're competing with ourselves. We feel ourselves, do I have to do this? Do I have to do that? I mean, there's a competition for my attention, but then on Shabbos, it all whoosh comes back together. And that is the splendor, Tehillah, the praise of Hashem. That the greatest thing that we can say about HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to do with his perfect unity and the fact that he is a unifier and brings everything together. So that's the beginning of Shabbat. That Shabbat just brings us all together, hopefully, and it's and then this idea of welcoming Shabbos, feeling Shabbos. I just want to say one more thing before I leave that first paragraph, the second really. The dichotomy idea of Shamor v'Zachor and Klal Yisrael and Shabbos and HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Shechina, all of the dichotomy they bring together. There really originally was a very strong custom that women on Friday night would light 2 candles. We all know that custom has lost. They're generally speaking, there are still some communities that do it, but the candle makers union won, and we light a lot of candles for all sorts of members of the family, and so which is wonderful. And but the original idea of 2 candles, and it fits in also with 2 challahs, that there is on Shabbat a dichotomy that is being brought together, and that's what we say here in the first paragraph. Yes, there are different realities, but we're unifying them, and that's the first aspect of Shabbat that Shlomo Alkabetz wants us to be aware of. The next, Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha. Okay, so this also is referring to the minhag, the custom of Rabbi Hanina, that people went out, okay, Likrat Shabbat, to go towards Shabbos. We're going out, okay, and we're walking, and this is actually based on a pasuk. I have to find the pasuk. There's a lot of psukim references here. So this is Yeshayahu, the book which is most quoted here in Lecha Dodi is Yeshayahu, and it's going to be exclusively Yeshayahu in a few paragraphs. And so now it says in chapter 2, verse 5, it says, Beit Yaakov, the house of Jacob, which could mean the women or it could mean all of Klal Yisrael. Lechu b'neilcha, come, let us walk together, ba'or Hashem, by the light of Hashem. Now this pasuk in the 2nd chapter of Isaiah is the source for what Shlomo Alkabetz is saying, but I just want to remind you, those of you who don't know Yeshayahu by heart, this verse 5 in chapter 2 of Yeshayahu is right after the famous Lo Yisagoy o Goy Charav, Lo Yimatu o Milchama, the famous Isaiah quote, across the street from the UN, that famous quote about the end of times and eternal peace is the verse before this one, come, let's go together. So what we're seeing here is a hint to something that Rav Alkabetz is going to talk about at great length in a couple of paragraphs, which is Geula. So even though we're talking about greeting Shabbos, the hint based on the verse that he's paraphrasing is a verse about Geula. So Shabbos and Geula cannot be, in the mind of Rav Shlomo Alkabetz, cannot be separated. So Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha, ki he makor habracha, because Shabbos is the source of all blessing. And that also is a quote from a pasuk. And that pasuk is in Mishlei, in Proverbs, and the quote from Shlomo Malch goes like this: Yehi mekorcha baruch, let your source or your fountain, a makor quite often meant a source of water, but here means the source of blessing. Let your source be blessed. The samach meisha norach, and you should find joy in the wife of your youth. Okay, so this idea of a blessed makor was first introduced by Shlomo HaMelech, but we're drawing on that. And the makor that we're talking about isn't a fountain or a wife who provides children and blessing for you and your family. Here it's talking about Shabbos becomes like this fountain which is providing blessing. This is based on a Zohar. And the Zohar says that the blessing for the week comes from Shabbos, that the nature of Shabbat ends up dictating the next week. And that whatever good stuff happens during the week is directly related to the way you kept Shabbos or to what happened on Shabbat. And this idea is very powerful. There are Kabbalists that go one step further, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu only gave the world enough battery power for 6 days. So there's 6 days, HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates. Poof. 6 days is all you've got. Then comes Shabbos. Shabbos is the recharge. And then the next 6 days were based upon how well that Shabbos recharged Bria. So it's not just recharging us. We talk about Shabbos recharging us. But in Kabbalah, Shabbat recharges all of creation. And then Shabbat is therefore the Makor Baruch, the holy source for whatever happens throughout our lives. May Rosh Mikedem Nisucha. From the outset, as of old it was ordained, is my translation. That's also a quote from a pasuk. I'll do the pasuk in just a minute. Sof ma'aseh b'machshava tchila. The end of the deed, the end of the action was the first thought. So what does that mean? May rosh mikedem nesucha. So the pasuk says, the pasuk says in Amos, the book of Amos, Ubeit el lo tosif od lehinabe, and no more is prophecy going to come out of Beit El. So Amos is saying, forget about the northern kingdom. He's worried about the southern kingdom, Jerusalem, Judea, and he's predicting the loss of the northern 10 tribes. That's not our context. Ki Mikdash Melech. Oh no, that's the next one. I took the wrong pasuk. Oh, dread. I marked it wrong. And the pasuk here should be in Mishlei anyways. So that initially Nesucha means many things. It can also mean to be like Yayin Nesech, to mean to be poured over. I apologize for you. I footnoted I put the note in the wrong place. This pasuk is also from Mishlei. We'll see it another time. But it's again Nasuch at the beginning, because Nesech, the libation over things, is the beginning of things. You pour on things to dedicate it. It's part of the Chanukah. So from the beginning, at the beginning of time, Mikedem was this system that we're living through. The system began, Mikedem can mean the east, it can mean, the beginning, it can mean, a very, very nice grape juice. So Meirosh Mikedem, from the beginning, at the beginning, it was ordained, it was the nusach, it was the system set up and was blessed that way, that what Sof Masev Machshavat Tchila. In other words, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world, he had Shabbos in mind. The purpose of creation was Shabbos, but it was the end of the system. So what happens is that even though the ultimate goal, the ultimate purpose of creating the world was to get to Shabbos, however, to get there, you had to go through this process of setting everything else up, because Shabbos only becomes significant if you can see the steps that got you there. And that's not only true in Bigadol, in the big philosophic picture, in the first week of creation. It's true of every week of our lives. In other words, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday are building up to something. The Shabbat not only blesses to make the coming week work, to power the 6 days that follow Shabbos, But Shabbos is a culmination of the things that happen during the week. Psychologically, this is so true. Your Shabbos is very, very often a reflection of what went on during your week. Sometimes you come into Shabbos, with this feeling of, wow, this is a lot of good stuff happened. Wow. Many times you come into Shabbos with, oh my God, I just need Shabbos because the week was so bad. Shabbos is, generally speaking, is supposed to be a reflection of the 6 days that came to it. But Shabbos is also, there's both ideas of being said by Rav Alkabetz, but Shabbos is also the power and energy to get through the next 6 days. I mean, this idea, hang in there, Shabbos is coming, is very powerful and very true. But we believe that in some esoteric, Kabbalistic way, there's a reality to it. My Shabbat does two things. It reflects the 6 days that came before, Sof Maaseh B'Machshava Tchila. It's the end of what went on before, but it also is Makor HaBracha. It also is the energy that gets me through the next 6 days. So that Shabbat is, if I can use an Avodah Zarah, an Avodah Zarah metaphor, it's Janus-like. It looks both ways. The Roman god, okay, that had two faces. It looked back and looked forward. January looks back and looks forward. That's Shabbos. Every Shabbos is Janus-like. It's Sof Maaseh B'Machshava Tchila, that it was HaKadosh Baruch Hu's intent to make Shabbos, and the creation was just building up to that, to that conclusion, to that climax, if you will. Okay, but on the other hand, Shabbat is powering the 6 days that come after it. Now, in reality, our Shabbat is split into many parts, and that's, there's a difference between, the first meal and the second meal and the third meal and the davening. The beginning of the day is more of a reflection, and the end of the day is more, especially Sudah Shlishit, is more anticipation. And especially this concept of anticipation carries into, Malava Malka, we're saying goodbye to Shabbat and we're going to miss it, and all of that. But what's going on in this second or third stanza is getting us aware of this duality of Shabbos, that Shabbos reflects what happened, but anticipates what's coming. And the Kabbalists, using the menorah as the metaphor, look at Shabbos as in the middle. Now, as the week really begins on Wednesday. That's why on Wednesday morning after Shir Shoyom for Yom Rabbi, the psalm for Wednesday, we ended with Lecha Neranena, with the first two psukim of Kabbalah Shabbos. So now Shabbos sort of begins on Wednesday, and you can say Havdalah until Tuesday. So Shabbos in Kabbalistic and Hasidic thinking, is in the middle, like the menorah. It's got three in front, the center, and then the three in the back. But I think leading up to Shabbos, and then that powers the coming six. But Shabbat is always viewed as the focus, the focal point of everything. And that's what Shlomo Alkabetz is saying here in this second paragraph. Unfortunately, we're going to have to end here. Next week we'll go faster. I don't know if we'll finish, but next week we'll go faster because we're not going to have as much of an introduction. We're going to get right into it, Be'ezrat Hashem, next week. And we're going to move away from talking about Shabbos to talking about Geula. And then at the end, we'll talk about weddings again. We'll come back to the concept of Chatuna.